Okay, excuse me. I'm Carol Minkiti, and
Excuse us, everybody.
it's my family who has taken over the Grolier Poetry Bookshop since my husband passed away 2 years ago. We wanted to continue this wonderful sacred place. And we're so happy that you're here tonight. And the people that are on Zoom, we welcome you as well. And we know it's going to be a wonderful reading with Andrea and Sarah. So thank you for coming.
So, okay, I'll take this off her to introduce Andrea. You see me? Okay. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here for all kinds of reasons. And it's wonderful to be with Andrea, my friend and fellow poet. Andrea Fry is a nurse practitioner at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. She published her first collection of poems, which is here somewhere, The Bottle Diggers, in 2017 with Turning Point Press. Her second collection, Poisons and Antidotes, followed this year from Deerbrook Editions, a publisher that she and I share. And it's the collection that she's launching tonight. She's been nominated twice for the Pushcart Prize. Her poems have appeared in Alaska Quarterly Review, Annals of Internal Medicine, Barrow Street, Cimarron Review, Spoon River Poetry Review, Women's Review of Books, Writers Resist, and many other publications. I should just say one word about the unusual title of her collection. As a cancer nurse, she knows that many medicines are also poisons, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Andrea thinks that in poetry, accurate observation, scientific observation, is better for us readers than sweetness. So is humor, and so is love. And I agree. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Carol and Indity and James and everybody else in the Grolier family who invited us here tonight. It is such, and thank you all of you for venturing out, and all of those of you who are beaming in tonight. It is just such a great honor to share our poetry with you. And it's also a wonderful way to commune with the spirit of Ifeanyi. I have to admit that I am often tempted to think in black and white, but it's like André Gide said, the color of truth is gray. And it's in this spirit that I offer you this collection of poisons and antidotes. Unless you see the skull and crossbones, most poison is hard to recognize. Sure, sometimes in nature, we'll see something that's painted bright red that jumps out at you to say, you, don't touch me, I'm poison. But by far, most poisons are totally unremarkable. They don't advertise, like mothballs, also known as naphthalene. My first poem is called Mothballs. If we didn't know you, we might see the innocuous, peppermints, a dwarf's snowballs, moon rocks, or marshmallows. Not like the red mushroom that screams its deadliness. You are wholly without color, a negative white, never to be found in nature or a prism. And with your whiteness, nothing to interpret, no distinction. You are not soft like cotton, nor sweet like gum, which reveals an inner goodness. Yet neither has evil appropriated your appearance. Maybe it's just that. You are nothing, just filler, weightless styrofoam pellets. But then again, you could be blank brains, psychopaths, a little gang of white supremacists, a litter of pit bulls hammered senseless, tiny Putin faces with chemical whiskers, white charcoal briquettes that could burn down the block with one match. Or if we'd forgotten you were there, and we came upon a strange white ball rolled in dust at rest in the corner, a strange marble, out of context, without landmarks like your 1950s packaging, fumes dulled and so all the more insidious. And in not remembering, we underestimate your power. Be too casual with you, let you share the drawer with loose change, unknown keys, lozenges, and paper clips. But naphthalene, what if we never knew you? Like a child who believes she's found a boring unwrapped mint, the kind in an old person's candy dish that's stale, that no one takes, but is still the closest thing this moment in her discovery to sugar. So she raises it to her mouth, closes her eyes, and tilts her head back while her tongue softens, ready for that sweet memory to come again. So maybe the color of love is gray. People can be good for us in one sense, but toxic in another. And it can take us a lifetime to try to understand that contradiction. This next poem is called He Will Come In From the Fields. Her father will come. He will come in from the fields, and she will see him, her father, who will smile slightly at seeing his small girl. She is dawdling, not dressing. She is singing to herself and waiting for her father. She is just 4. She chases the cat and sees her own white body flash across the mirror. She watches herself in the mirror, sees her naked body, and is joyful. She traps her cat and pulls him close to her, holds his warm, pulsing fur against her bare chest, and buries her chin against his soft head. She watches herself in the mirror, hugging the cat hard, so hard he wriggles out of her tiny arms. She laughs when her cat wriggles away. She is happy to be without clothes, to feel her own body, happy that her father will soon come in from the fields. When he opens the door, he will bring the smell of wheat, sweat, and motor oil with him. And she will know it's him, and he will lift her up in his leathery arms as if to choose her, and press her against his leathery face. He will come in from the fields for noon dinner, and the table will be set with bowls of peaches, zucchini, tomatoes, chipped beef, and white toast. From the window, she can see the midday heat quivering just over the fields. She can see him come, her father, his body, just a speck at first that gets bigger as he gets closer to the house. And the speck takes on the step of her father, his thin, limping body. The blue of his overalls becomes clearer. She sees him come in from the fields, his strict face, a face she knows. She can't bear to wait any longer, so she runs to the screen door and pushes it so it swings back wildly, slams backward into the house so the wasps scatter in anger, and her naked body enters the roar of the cicadas, and she flies across the farm to meet him, her little white body, a white streak flashing across the windmill, across the water tank, across the tool shed, her small arms pumping, her eyes set on her father, so excited to see when he will see her. She's so close, she sees the change in his eyes when he sees she is naked, but she can't stop, can't disbelieve her joy, can't believe he doesn't want to hug her and her little white body. So she flies into his rage that she is without clothes, that she is without shame, his own shame that his girl would be without clothes. So his leathery arms swoop down and he grabs her small, weightless body, which he swings in his rage. He drops down onto the tree stump and flips her over his bony knee, swings his right arm back like a whip and brings it down hard across her white quivering bottom. She struggles but can't wriggle away because he's holding her hard, and she sees now that something about her joy is wrong. Something about her is wrong. Something is wrong with her little white body. Some poisons can create a disconnect from reality, a kind of delirium, but forget about poisons for a moment. I swear living in everyday life can easily trigger delirium. This next poem is called Help Desk. Before I address your call, please confirm your name and password. A temporary code has been sent to your mobile phone. Please enter this into the keypad.
What am I supposed to do?
You must answer your security question before we can proceed. What is your favorite root vegetable? I'm sorry, your answers don't match. Try again. What is your favorite root vegetable? I'm sorry, your answers don't match. Try again. What is your favorite root vegetable? I'm sorry, your answers don't match. Would you like to try a different security question? How many goats do you see in the following picture? I am not a robot. Okay, stop me when I have stated the nature of your problem. Hardware, software, password, psychosis. Okay, psychosis. Have you tried restarting your system? Have all updates been installed? Has a scan been performed? Were any security issues detected and quarantined? I'm sorry, you'll have to come in to see an agent. Our hours are 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., Monday through Friday. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Would you be willing to take a short survey? Doesn't it feel, though, like we've been living in a mad, mad world, a world of spectators and performers? This poem is called The Show Dog. The show dog came in the room and told the other dogs that things weren't looking so good, that it was as bleak as it could get. This made a lot of the dogs get up from their chairs and leave. They were thinking, they didn't come here to hear this. Only a few dogs stayed. Then the show dog took out his bongo drums and played. Audience dogs opened their mouths and smiled. Well, this is more like it, they said, their pink tongues hanging over the sides of their teeth. A dog in the front row said, I just like to see a dog do that. The show dog played a while, and the audience dog stayed just to see a dog do that. So we're inching now towards antidotes, trying to reclaim our human connection. This next poem is called Ancient Man from Chauvet Cave Speaks, and it's about the imprint of a prehistoric man or woman's hand on a cave wall in southeastern France. Ancient Man from Chauvet Cave Speaks. I was there with the ibex, the oryx, the lion. I worshipped horses, bison, and bear. I ate reindeer. I spoke in ibex, oryx, and lion. In case you came, I left the negative of my hand. I have come back to find your cave. I look for your ibex, your oryx, your lion. Do you worship the horse, the bison, the bear? Is your sex like mine, round with a cleft or long? I have come back to see your hand. You were not there with the horses, bison, or bear. You do not speak in ibex, oryx, or lion. Where is your cave? Do you worship the sex? Is it long like mine or round with a cleft? I look for the negative of your hand. I tell you though, the temptation never goes away, whether out of fatigue or laziness, to want to oversimplify, to reduce the world back down into black and white again. This poem is called The Glitter of the Simple. Oh, I would divide the world into binaries, cast each earthly element to a pole, good or bad, according to its flag. the stonefish with its ugly mug, black-whiskered tarantula. Simply by appearances, I would judge. And likewise, disregarding conflicting evidence, I would crown the beautiful, the uncanny blues and gold of the poison dart frog, the sacred passion flower ringed by purple filaments, though its cool smiles nest in leaves of cyanide. Then I would round the numbers up or down, toss out their remainder, throw out the imperfect squares, too cumbersome to carry. I would ignore details. Castor oil is good, but the beans will kill you if you chew them. He stole the turnips, for he had nothing. The responsibility of understanding extenuating circumstance exhausts me. The charge of calculating dose so as not to wander to the dark side of the continuum overwhelms me. Both substance and creature slink over a delicate border, can so easily pass from poison to antidote. When lethal foxglove tempers a bedeviled heart, or the heretic pulls his body out of the mud, climbs from ignominy to acclamation, to be cheered by the crowd and rise with the sun. My animal brain is too weary, too lazy to carry all the infinitesimal gradations that live within the range. It is too much to fathom. I would put each in an opposing corner and discard the entire in-between. Even life's gravity would go away, become as simple as melodrama. Snidely whiplash and Dudley do-right. Cherry without a stone. Child with no crying. The surface iridescence of the beetle's wing would be everything. How clean the world would be, and damned. As I was thinking about which poems to read tonight, I realized that most of the poems I wanted to read came from the antidotes section, so I think that's probably a good thing. This next poem is called Leaving the Bitter. Now, with the simplest gesture, rise from your chair and leave the old wounds behind. And as you rise, let the raft of wrongs lose its mooring. Let your tally of others' ecstasies and fortune dangle. Now let them fall. Enter into winter's frigid air, its stillness. There is no justice, there is no rancor, just the icicle that gives itself up in painless drops. Sky that's never been so blue, and the red cardinal's black mask against the snow. Humor. Is humor not the best antidote? This next poem is called, it's actually a recipe, and it's called Heavenly Angel Food Cake. And there's a testimonial at the top of the recipe that goes like this. This light, moist cake is just heavenly, shares Milagro de Milagros of Los Angeles, California. Heavenly Angel Food Cake. First, separate the egg yolks. Set aside or send them off like a dozen monks. Let the whites sit like Quakers at room temperature for 30 minutes, as humble as a bowl of spit. Let them reflect upon themselves. Meanwhile, sift the sugar and flour together 3 times. Infuse the earth with lofty thoughts, 1 part substance, 3 parts air. Now, return to the whites, which should be foaming or speaking in tongues. Beat them hard like a Puritan. Whip them into something more than this, their basest form, and watch the transformation from frothy dribble to cherub's robe. First, soft crescents swell in gentle willingness, like virgins bow their heads in reverence. With each turn, their zeal multiplies. Slowly, gloved hands emerge and push upward toward the skies. Just as they aspire to their stiffest peaks, anoint them with oils of almond and vanilla, and let the essence permeate. Now, adding a little at a time, fold the flour gently into the whites. Batter should be airy and delicate. Lightly spoon into a pan. Cut through the batter with a knife to remove any pockets of sin. Cake should rise. So one of the traps that we often fall into is to, with regard to the gray zone, is to trust that our intellect can prepare us for the future. This is called advanced directives. If the situation should arise in which there is no reasonable expectation of my recovery, you've asked that I provide instructions. In the event that I am incapacitated, you have said it would be prudent of me to spell out to a designated representative exactly what can and can't be done to my body. Furthermore, it has been suggested by other reasonable people to consider such things when I am of sound mind and body, so that I can die with dignity, since dying with dignity is all any of us can ask, and since we can't ask not to die. If the situation should arise when I am unable to make my own healthcare decisions, unlike now, when I smell onions frying and the curry leaves mingle perfectly with the goat, and I've just seen the wood duck claim the box I hung in the cedar swamp, and I can't stop smiling at the twang of the banjo, and I feel randy for the first time since winter, unlike now when life-sustaining measures are less brutal. In the event that my heart is so diseased that it falls into a renegade rhythm, pulsing and pumping indiscriminately while my abandoned kidneys scream and my hands and toes purple in quiet protest. Perhaps I don't want reasonable people to mount my chest like bushwhackers crashing the forest, smash my ribs and slap my heart silly, bang it back into this world. If the situation should arise that I can't breathe and I open my mouth as wide as I can and suck and heave the air with all my strength, but still can't usher enough of it into my lungs, am I thinking of dignity? It is in accordance with my convictions and beliefs that I have loved someone well for 50 years, and my heart warms like a cat in the sun when I see him. The tap dancer, so in love with the gentle rhythm of her own clicks, can't imagine her body imploding from tumor. I request my healthcare agent make decisions in accordance with my wishes, knowing also that I've wasted my life until now. And while I lie dying, I see the softest snowfall for the first time and ask that you disregard anything previously uttered by my sound mind and body. I find myself drifting towards that antidote that doesn't candy coat. This poem is called No Place of Sorrow. I'm told of a man who carries a sack of turnips dusted with dirt across the country to a woman he doesn't yet know. I watched a boy nail a string of purple neon lights to the cross on his venerable grandfather's grave. These offerings don't come from a place of sorrow. A woman wore dark glasses to cover her eyes, said she needed a miracle. So she left in the twilight for Tulsa to tithe to the Oral Roberts Evangelistic Association. An act of desperation, maybe, or innocence, but not yet despair. I traffic in hope, for I am hopeless. I trend with the guileless, for I am with guile. I, without offering, peek from the bush at the singular bowerbird, wrapped in his exotic dream. He lays his carpet of blue bottle caps, blue marbles and bluets, his bubblegum pink pom-pom crest, a garish corsage of joy. I watch his spastic but earnest dance. You who are silly, you without sorrow, I choose. So never doubt the power of a good story for an antidote. This next poem was adapted from a story that my cousin Buzz's wife Kelly told, and I think she forgives me. This poem is called The Renderer. Our Patsy died last night. 15 years with that horse we had, a big old gal, sweet and constant. You could set a little baby on Patsy's back, send her down the lane and know that baby'd be safe, like pushing Moses' little boat into the reeds. My boys were quiet this morning, no squabbling. I knew they were wondering how they were going to live without their horse, how Patsy's big old body would make its way to heaven. I told them that God would come and be real gentle with Patsy. Why, he'd carry her across the sky to the most beautiful pasture covered with grass and clover, dotted with butterflies. A brook, too, with all the water Patsy could drink. I watched the boys' eyes and I knew they were seeing Patsy in that pasture, seeing her look up at them, her mouth stuffed with grass. Now and then she'd dip her muzzle into the brook, plunge her pink tongue into the water with a splash. And as I described it to the boys, I started to see it myself, to feel it myself. Her sleek brown flank so warm from the sun, you could lay your face on it, smell the sweet dust, just a hint of manure, and all the time grabbing her stiff mane with both hands, hanging on tight to what you know. I put the boys in the back seat of the pickup, and they leaned forward with their little faces up behind me. I could feel their warm breath on my neck. I needed to get us out of there before heat came, so I drove fast down our winding drive, sailing through the deep ruts of dried mud, the truck rocking from side to side. All the while, the boys kept asking me to describe old Patsy in her heavenly pasture, to say it again and again, how God would carry her away, how sweet her life would be, that we'd sure miss her, but we could be certain that she'd be happy, that she'd be safe with the Lord. Then I saw the head of that green truck climbing the hill in front of us like a monster. It groaned, let off a big burst of exhaust, then stopped in the middle of the road so we dared not try to pass. The driver jerked the brake up like he was snapping something's neck. Then he lumbered over to my side of the car, his red chapped belly spilling out of his pants, cigarette pasted to his lip. He looked right past the boys and growled, "I'm going to have to saw the legs off, lady, before I hook it. Then I drag it out on its back, have to take the stall door off, barn door too." He blew smoke into the truck as he talked. I felt like I was standing at the edge of Patsy's heavenly pasture, and all I knew is I had to keep him out. I rolled up the window so his voice became muffled, but we could see his black eyes and see that cigarette moving up and down as his wet, blood-red lips contorted. I let out the clutch, hit the gas, and swerved the truck over as far as I could to get around him, then barreled down the drive. I kept on going fast and steady till we hit the main road. I slid onto the pavement and drew a breath. The boys were as quiet as could be, not a single scuffle from the truck. We drove for several minutes in silence until finally a little angel voice came sweetly from the back. "Mama?" "Yes, Jack," I said. "Was that God?" My last poem I dedicate to my uncle Ifani, who is the reason the Grolier exists today. And I believe that Ifani delighted equally in everyday life and the realm of the imagination, both of which merge to form the most fantastic gray area of them all. And this poem is called The Gnarled and Fantastic. "I don't want a soul-crushing job," my nephew says. And so I look down at my own chest as if to check my own soul, and yes, it is crushed. So I tell him, they've all been soul-crushing, every one. Work that is on rare occasion harrowing, but mostly boring. Sometimes, Ian, if I'm sitting quietly in my chair at work, the lights go off because the motion sensor thinks I don't exist. I flail my arms to restore my station in the universe. I'll take my place among the other trillion cogs, even take a perverse pleasure in never standing outside the world's drill. I can only be among those who embrace some routine, those who sell, scrub, collate, slice onions, cut out gallstones, tally, enter data, teach a child to wash her hands, lay wire, pour concrete, test urine, convince judges, hold meetings. Most everyone's a doer of unmemorable things. Every job a sledgehammer to some other impulse. Call it your soul if you wish. But why shouldn't the soul have to work like the rest of our being, like the gut, the lungs, the bowels, or heart? The soul must be sufficiently crushed to escape, like that crocodile that crossed the canal on a blue foam noodle to save itself.
Disclose it.
There's a knowledge gained in being behind bars that prepares you for the change,
Or you
that different morning, the
leave.
one that brings the rider on his horse to the purple myrtle.
Yeah.
That's when you'll run, convict. Against the sunrise and November wind, you'll peel off your clothing and let each rag fall to the furrows as you tear across fields. The echo of the dogs does not stop you, for you are at the edge of woods, and you'll enter them as a solemn child. You'll look upward into the trees and see the limbs, gnarled and fantastic. Thanks, everybody, and thank you all for coming and for those who beamed in.
Now what do I do?
Nothing.
Oh.
Is it over? I guess I'll do my intro like this.
Mute yourself.
It is with great pleasure that I introduce Sarah White. Sarah earned her BA decades ago from a nearby college, then known as Radcliffe. She majored in French, learned Italian, and has never lost interest in the Romance languages and their importance in English and American poetry. Her own work, always in English, has been published in such journals as Paris Review, Western Humanities Review, Poetry Nation Review from the UK, Verse Virtual from A Village of Its Own, and Hanging Loose from Brooklyn. 6 collections of hers have appeared, 3 of them from Deerbrook Editions. Her most recent publication, which she will emphasize tonight, is Fledgling, a chapbook of sonnets from WordTech Communications. Sarah taught French language and literature for 23 years at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. After retirement and a move to New York, she began painting and now divides her time between work at the desk and work at the easel. She is proud to share a publisher, Jeffrey Haste of Deerbrook Editions, with me.
Can you help me get out of this?
You want to leave?
Yes, I think it's over now.
No. You just introduced somebody. I think Sarah.
Okay. Well, I wasn't going to read this poem, but from this book, not the sonnet book. But this gray is the star of this evening. So I have to read a poem called The Birth of Gray. If I can find it, hang on. I had a mark in it, here it is. The Birth of Gray. You may paint a starless night, but that's not gray, which lies like most of life between poles of dark and light. By the way, why do so many words for white, bialy, bianco, blanc, sound more like black? The answer sleeps in the heart of a Middle English maid. Don't wake her up. Rather, make another gray without a trace of either black or white. Spin the color wheel. Stop it, say on blue. Spin again and stop at the opposite or complementary hue. By miracle of spectrum, conundrum of prism, by luck or lust, or both, when green and red, or orange and blue are one, your grays will gleam like the moon, shine like the sun. Little something about painting. And since I'm in this book, before I go to the other one, I will read the probably most important, possibly the only important thing I did while I was attending the college, whatever its name is, down the street. Here it's about to lose a little bit more of its name, and they're changing the name, or they're adding Harvard to the name of the institute. So it's really losing it. But anyway, that's another topic. Probably the most important thing I did was to read Dante with, at the time, the most important specialist in the country, Charles Singleton. Anyway, this is called Of Stars and Scholars, and it's structured, it has 3 stanzas. You can see the 3 stanzas, each of which ends with the same word, which is like the Inferno and the Purgatorio and the Paradiso all end with the word stelle. Of Stars and Scholars. When first I opened the Commedia, my heart was startled by the intricate design of that grand encyclopedia. 3 major parts, each with the same final word. After Dante views the punishments, he stands pure and prepared to see the stars. Then he climbs a mountain to meet his muse and governess. I was a nervous, pessimistic girl, longing for a mentor as kind as Virgil, as wise as Beatrice, learned as Professor Singleton, timid eminence among the Harvard stars. We finished Paradiso just as spring came through the window. I didn't head outside to play, but stayed in Seaver Hall to follow every terza rima the way the poet follows love, because his lady's eyes are really stars. So now I will move to my little book of sonnets, not very many of them. And I will start with the title poem, Fledgling. There are no other poems in this book that have anything to do with geese, but I'll come back to some geese at the very end. I got interested in the word fledgling. You know, it's sort of in the same family of words as flesh in French, the arrow, because it has feathers on the end, and it has to do with feathers. Fledgling. Without enough feathers for flight, she waits in the nest, safe and starved as if to death, for a full-feathered nurse to feed her. Yet after a month, the nervous gosling embraces the air and does not fall. She glides to the grass, below. Good for her. Now her neck will darken to blue-black and lengthen like her white skirt. Once fledged, she'll join a contingent flying beside the goose she chooses to be chosen by. With him, she'll seek a far-off lake where they compose a home of boughs with cushions of brown and white down from their own breasts. Geese are monogamous, I hear. Many of the other sonnets, and you probably noticed that the sonnet is not properly Petrarchan or Shakespearean. There are lots of rhymes, but they're not in the quote unquote right places, but that's the way. So a lot of the other sonnets are about islands, because a lot of my life is sort of related to various islands. And the islands tend to kind of blend into one another. This poem is called Scapes. All the islands I have known become one island whose eastern coast spreads sandy arms to welcome bathers and sea tortoises, while in the west, a reef shreds the ships of armed invaders. Exhalations from a simmering volcano perfume expensive evenings in casinos. In an idle cane field, middle schoolers half listen to a lesson on the planters who demanded dire, despairing labor and glutted the whole world with rum and sugar. At Castle Point, a dark green ocean crashes into a teal green sea, carving boulders into a place for whales to play, not me. I seek forests where fern and limb combine to weave a kinder island dream. There is a place in Guadeloupe where you can really see the color of the Caribbean and the color of the Atlantic coming together. It's quite exciting. A little more about painting here. This is Confession. All I want to do is paint. Unless for now, I try a sonnet while I wait for the marks to dry on a landscape of sienna in its usual shades, raw and burnt, spelt with double N's, while the town itself has only one, and one famed horse race. You heard about the Palio. Competitors careen downhill from the black and white striped cathedral, whose nave is inlaid with New Testament lore, like the massacre of the innocents. I have to wonder at the mind and conscience of an artist able to arrange slain infants so lovingly along a marble floor. And one more sonnet about the problems of painting. This is one about if you're interested in doing portraits. It's called Resemblances. A sacred shroud, a sacred veil, spots on a mildewed wall, random spills of oil or ink have all been known to bear the face of some beloved person. Even a freak cheese sandwich made the Virgin's features visible. For years, I tried and failed to record my brother's expression. Once, visiting his house, I sketched him on a napkin. It worked. He was nearly there. Then I tried to make a careful copy and completely missed the mark. Anyone who saw my struggles might have said, "Who do you think you are? Jesus Christ, bringing back the dead?" Okay, one more kind of painting related. Tuscans in their homes. On a Renaissance fresco in Siena stands a figure with the very nose and eyes of Roberto, a Sienese I knew. As if the townsfolk had worn the same face for centuries. Funny, most of us never come upon the valley or the village where everybody's eyes, chins, and noses look like our own. I met a Florentine. He asked where I was from. I said, New York. He said, no, he said, you're from the Mugello. I thought, uh-oh. Giotto was from there. An ugly man, according to Boccaccio. But he painted such handsome people. Weren't they from the Mugello too? These are rather silly problems. You're lucky if your problems aren't any worse than these. And this one is another, this island is Jamaica. Folk medicine in Ocho Rios. My kid was sick, aching, feverish. One cheek had sprung a mump. In a few hours, there might be two. Loretta, the Jamaican cook, Jamaican shaman, intervened with gifts, a white gull feather and a covered jar of proof rum, denatured alcohol. Dip the feather in the rum and brush the mump. No new mump will come. I thanked her. Then the magic objects slipped my mind. I left them on the porch. Next morning, Malcolm woke, fully mumped. Loretta eyed the untouched liquor, the futile feather, the child. She eyed the pale, irresponsible, unworthy mother. So I'm going to read there's something called a crown of sonnets. And this is 7 sonnets. They're linked by their first and last lines. And they usually sort of tell a story and come around to the beginning. So I will read this crown of sonnets and I'll say the numbers of the sonnets so you can tell where you've gotten to. It's called Mother, age 75, sorts her papers beside the fire. 1. Martha, my mother, drops a letter in the flames. After glancing at the address, I'm surprised. Mom, why? It was from Frank. A passionate love letter, the kind I always burn, she replies. Letters of courtship and marriage, my father's, stand packed in shoeboxes around her. Not letters from her years as a widow. The tissue-thin airmail from France. I found them all one summer at the post office in town when I walked down to fetch them. I'd watch her slice one open with a slender blade, read the lines and blush, warmed by some unseen flame. I always burn passionate love letters. Don't you? Who, me? I only wish I knew. 2. I only wish I knew who mother was. A kind person possessed at times by meanness, or a mean person brushed at times by breaths of kindness. It's too long ago to matter. I remember nearly every word she said. I remember the mother she remembered, Grace, who never settled anywhere more than a month or so, never owned a house, often leased a suite of rooms and scattered cushions of her own all around, indifferent to a daughter's need for home or friends or a pet more alive than a pillow, a cat named Maddie, a parakeet named Willow. A garden of her own would have been best. 3. A garden with a tree house would be best. Instead, she learned to be the ideal guest, always conforming to the moment's host or hostess, aunt, uncle, even governess. She studied much too well their manners, accents, never memorizing elementary numbers, but learning how to fashion bows for her hair. In time, she read Mark Twain and Victor Hugo on her own. Had she been in school, she would have shone. Meanwhile, Grace played a game in the casino that no one ever wins, as far as we know. When the allotted family funds ran thin, Grace had a banker brother in Illinois. She'd write to him, to get along, you have to charm the men. 4. You have to charm the men in Paris and New York. They will not wed a girl who loves a pastime such as painting. My father, handsome young advisor to well-born investors, taught her that arts and marriage do not work together. Both a palate and a man require devotion. The most possessive of the two would win. Alas for her, the most possessive one was him. After she died, I found a painting in the attic, a damn good one. But she had quit and wouldn't paint again, not even in long years when he was gone. Was that why I myself began to paint? Perhaps, but not till I was old and she was dead. 5. Now that I am old and she is dead, I love the studio. What would she have said? She believed me better off in school, where I studied lives of medieval saints and other figures old as the millennium. We took turns. First, her mother kept her out of school. Then my mother had me schooled for years and years, studying songs from centuries ago. Martha took an interest in my studies. I let her come to class with me. She assured me it was purely out of interest, never envy. I believed her when she said it wasn't envy that made her come to class with me and fall in love with Dante. 6. She came to class with me. She fell in love and began to lead a study group for friends who marveled over the theology in the last 2 parts, or canticles, becoming pilgrims through purgatory, paradise, never setting foot in the inferno. Mother decided, sight unseen, that hell was horrid, not to be discussed. I said nothing of the wondrous poetry she missed, like the sins of Paolo and Francesca. I said nothing of our disagreement, remembering a happy moment long ago when I was 17 and she took me to the Prado. 7. She took me to the Prado in Madrid, where if I had a daughter, I would take her. We'd gaze at proud meninas, go eat gazpacho, and see an Almodovar movie, me and Gracie, my daughter and companion. I'd hope she wouldn't be a medievalist, standing on the shoulders of gigantic scholars. And she might choose to do just that, wondering why I quit philology. If we ever sorted papers by the fire and came upon a hymn to Brother Sun and Sister Moon in my translation from Italian, Gracie would evoke the memory of Martha, Frank, and Francis of Assisi, one by one. She and I together would intone their names and fling the poem into the dancing flames. So one more, which takes, this is eventually winds back to the fledglings. This is sort of like twin sonnets kind of glued together. When, as a girl, I was very, very homesick, I had a way of weeping while my features remained entirely without expression. Usually sitting in a group of others listening to the chatter, and if anyone told me there's a stream running down your face, I'd say, it's pollen in the air. I have an allergy. I would have liked to tell them about the day-old kitten that cannot cry aloud for what it wants, only shape a meow with its mouth. But for me to voice a syllable like cat would have sufficed to crack the inner ice and flood the place. Later, when my sweetheart died, I stood cheeks dry beside his grave, hearing the goodbyes of others. My turn came to share a memory of our time together, now lost. Instead, I recited lines I'd written, almost but not quite opening the floodgates. Almost but not quite, because I chose a poem without his name in it, or any meals we ever ate together, or our evening walks beside the lake where it didn't rain and the one sound was that of agitated adult geese whose young were training for the long, blind flight to a place so far from home that I watched their wings recede, and finally began to grieve. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. That took too long.
I want to thank both of you very much for being here. Yes, thank you so much for coming and being here and sharing your poems. Quite a variety and very interesting. You don't want to take any questions from the audience?
If there are any.
Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask the poets? Any?
I have a question for Sarah. I was wondering why you chose English as the language to write all of your.
It's the only language I really know. That's all. I mean, I've studied the others. I don't know them well enough. Thank you. It's not a very inspiring answer. And I love English. I mean, it is absolutely, I adore English, even though I spent all that time studying other languages. I know there's an important baseball game going on.
You have a question?
I have a question.
There's a question.
And when did you start writing poetry? I know like some, at least the novel is fantastic. I know you've been through several different careers in your life. But I didn't know if you came to poetry early or something.
No, I guess I started fairly early, but probably not seriously until I was a young adult. So, and then even more seriously, maybe in my 30s and 40s. So, but I sort of dabbled in it early on. Always liked it.
What I think is so interesting is that the poetry comes so much out of the context of your life, in the context of your life. And just sharing it in poetry is quite beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Any more questions? Well, we thank you for being here at the Grolier. And I know that Ifanyi's spirit is over you, because Angie's spirit is Ifanyi's niece.
Yes, I know.
And so-
I met him when I was here
Did you
before.
meet him?
Yes, I read here before. Yeah.
Oh, you
I did
read-
meet him. Yeah, I
You
did.
had read here before then, huh?
Mhm.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I met him and I read him. Also, he sent me his book.
Seems like we sort of secret wants to hear more poetry.
Thank you very much for sharing. There's some books for sale.
Yes, buy books. Buy
This
books.
is James.
Yeah, James. Hooray for James. Been an enormous help.